Tonight, the chairman of Google and the chairman of Facebook agree. They both want to censor the internet. I'll prove it to you. It's New Year's Eve, and you're watching the Ezra Levant Show.
Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government about why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
So the executive chairman of Google, named Eric Schmidt, wrote a column in the New York Times calling for automatic censorship online. He didn't call it that. He called it How to Build a Better Web. But here's what he wrote. It's all too easy to use the internet exclusively to connect with like-minded people rather than seek out perspectives that we wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. This sort of tribalism masks the need for common values and strong leadership. Hang on, is there a right way and a wrong way to use the internet? Sounds like the executive chairman of Google has an opinion about who I should connect with, and he thinks we need strong leadership to change that. Here, let me read more from him. He says, the internet is also allowing some of our worst traits in the form of envy, oppression, and hate to come into full view as well. We need strong leaders worldwide who will fight broadly for human progress and tolerance and focus on bettering everyone's lives. Okay, well, envy is a human emotion, so is hate. Both often come from a sense of grievance or injustice. Oppression, that he also mentions, that means some sort of injustice, holding people down. If you're oppressed, it's natural to feel hard emotions. Again, he says he wants strong leaders to fight for tolerance, but didn't he just list 3 things that he will not tolerate, including the wrong human emotions? I mean, I don't want to feel hate, but when I watch the news about the Islamic State terrorists and how they oppress people, I feel hatred towards them. I mean, isn't that normal? Isn't that healthy? Are we not supposed to feel hate? Are we supposed to tolerate them? Then Schmidt wrote this. He said, we should make it ever easier to see the news from another country's point of view and understand the global consciousness free from filter or bias. Okay, but who gets to determine what is biased or not? I think the CBC is biased and that the Rebel tells it like it is. Other people think the CBC is objective and we're biased. Isn't it up to individuals to sort through the world from their own point of view? Schmidt himself is biased. He and Google have overwhelmingly donated towards the Democratic Party versus Republicans. How can he determine what's neutral and what's not? Why should I have to read my news about communist China from their point of view, or North Korea's or Iran's? And why should I trust that Google is going to give it to me straight, given their susceptibility to government pressure, especially from China and their lucrative market? But I haven't even got into the heart of his column yet. Here, read this. He says, we should build tools to help de-escalate tensions on social media, sort of like spell checkers, but for hate and harassment. Pardon me? De-escalate tensions? What does that mean? I want to debate things. I want to challenge things. I don't want to submit to authority or to the mob. I want to create tension sometimes where I see a problem. I mean, didn't he just say we need to fight oppression? How can I fight oppression if I'm being told to calm down? Don't be so tense, man. But the last part is positively terrifying. He says, spell checkers, but for hate and harassment. What does that mean? How does Eric Schmidt know if I'm writing a criticism from an emotionally neutral place or from love or from hate? If I write a tweet or a Facebook comment and I'm feeling happy, is that okay by him? As opposed to if I'm feeling mad? Is being sad okay? And he said harassment. I know what that means in the criminal law, but I don't know what that means on Twitter or Facebook. To a social justice warrior, anything's harassment. We've discovered that modern university students are triggered, that's their new word, by anything at all, even by using words like chairman or Manitoba. Schmidt says we should target social accounts for terrorist groups. Okay, but that's already covered under criminal and counterterrorism laws. What's that got to do with me? With spell checking my emotions? Schmidt says that without this censorship, he calls it spell checking, isn't that a delightful euphemism? The internet could lead to, quote, the empowerment of the wrong people and the wrong voices. Or the wrong ones, eh? But didn't Schmidt just tell us we should listen to people who we disagree with directly? Shouldn't he follow his own advice and listen to people with the wrong opinions instead of censoring them? His last line is just too much. Let me read it to you. He says, "It's up to us to make sure that when the young girl reading this in Indonesia on her tablet moves on from this page, the web that awaits her is a safe and vibrant place, free from coercion and conformity." Safe, I like that word, a word usually applied in response to violence, opposite to violence. But in this case, he means safe from political bias, safe from views that are triggering. Trigger itself used to mean the trigger of a gun, but now it means the trigger of an idea. Those last 30 words he used are just gorgeous Orwell: coercion and conformity. Eric Schmidt just spent 1,000 words telling us how he wants to pasteurize and homogenize all political actions on the internet, to spell check away any inappropriate feelings. But then he says, we want a world free from coercion and conformity. It reads like Orwell's Newspeak in the book 1984, where the Ministry of Truth was the new name for the Ministry of Propaganda. The Ministry of Peace was the new name for the War Office. Eric Schmidt of Google just outlined his vision to ban envy, hate, bias, and, quote, harassment from the internet. And yet he says he's doing so to fight conformity. That's a madman. Who is the boss of Google, which also owns YouTube? They dominate the internet, rivaled only by Facebook. Well, 3 days after Schmidt talked about filtering out CrimethInc, here's what Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg wrote. He said, "I want to add my voice in support of Muslims in our community and around the world." Okay, it's great that he supports Muslims, but look at this next line. "After the Paris attacks and hate this week, I can only imagine the fear Muslims feel that they will be persecuted for the actions of others." Hang on, that's his biggest takeaway from the terrorist attack by Muslims that hit France? His top concern is not the murder of the victims, the ideology that led to that murder. That's not his concern. He's concerned about an imaginary backlash that Muslims might face. What does that even mean? Well, he'll tell you. He said, "If you're a Muslim in this community, as the leader of Facebook, I want you to know that you are always welcome here and that we will fight to protect your rights and create a peaceful and safe environment for you." All right, well, what does that mean? Fight for your rights. Zuckerberg's not a lawyer fighting for rights in court. He's not a politician or a public office holder or even a soldier fighting for things. The only thing he controls, and it's a huge thing, is what is said and done on Facebook. That's obviously what he means. And he said he will make it a peaceful and safe environment. But Facebook is not violent or unsafe. It's words and ideas. It's virtual reality. There are no guns or bombs in it. What Zuckerberg really means is the Eric Schmidt sense of the words. Zuckerberg's promise can only be taken to mean that users on Facebook, as in you, will be censored and limited if you criticize Islam. Nothing yet from Zuckerberg on making Facebook free of anti-Semitism or anti-Christian bigotry, of course. Facebook's chief operating officer wrote right back to her boss saying, "Thank you, Mark. This is such a welcome post. We should not just tolerate our differences, but embrace them." Hang on, I don't want to embrace my differences with people who believe in Sharia law. I don't want to embrace people who believe that women are subordinate to men. I believe in the separation of mosque and state. I'm opposed to honor killings. I do not want to embrace those different ideas. Now, all of this is pretty vague, eh? But we can already see what it means in real life. Tariq Fatah, a great Muslim liberal here in Toronto, regularly has his Facebook page shut down by Facebook for criticizing Islam. Do you see the difference already? Tariq is a Muslim person, but Facebook shuts him down for criticizing the ideology of radical Islam. So Zuckerberg and Sandberg right now are protecting a religion itself from criticism, even from its own members like Tariq, who seek to debate it and reform it and enlighten it. And Tariq was targeted before Zuckerberg's big announcement. Look at this. Someone named Nadim Kobeisi wanted to make a simple Facebook post about a BBC News story about political polling in France. He's a French Muslim himself, if I'm not mistaken, but it doesn't matter. Look at what Facebook said to him. It rejected his Facebook status update, saying the link was, quote, unsafe. And then he had to delete the link, and then it would be published. I like that phrase. It was security that said it was unsafe. A story on the BBC News, the state broadcaster of the United Kingdom, and that story is a security risk? Imagine saying that in the age of real security risks, that talking about terrorism itself is a security risk. Kobeisi wrote, Facebook, you're going full Orwell. Never go full Orwell. I like a Muslim with a sense of humor who understands the value of freedom of speech, and yet he, like Tariq Fatah, was censored by Facebook. So we've got Google. We've got Facebook. And here's Twitter. Take Adam Baldwin, an actor, celebrity, 250,000 followers on Twitter, and he loves video games and he's politically incorrect. So he was writing about a fight in the video game world called Gamergate. It's a dispute where feminists try to shut down video games that are too masculine, that are too violent, that portray women in a manner that feminists object to. So it's trying to bring political correctness into video games. It's a dispute, great, free speech, have a debate, whatever. Well, no. That's the point. That's what Eric Schmidt would call hateful or oppressive or biased. That's what Mark Zuckerberg would call an unsafe environment. And so look at what happened when Adam Baldwin tried to post a tweet to his own readers, people who voluntarily sign up to hear from him, just like your Facebook friends voluntarily choose to be your friends. Twitter interposed itself and its political judgment between consenting adults. And Twitter told Baldwin he was not allowed to post that because it was harassing or threatening or violating some other rules. But look at what the tweet he wrote said. He said that women who like video games uncensored are prettier and happier than the feminists who want to censor them. That's what he wrote. More attractive and more joyous. And for those trigger words, he wasn't just blocked from tweeting, his entire Twitter account was locked down, sealed up, shut down, like it had a disease and had to be quarantined. And all he had to do, said Twitter, was just delete that one little crime think. Just unthink that thought, and the thought crime would be thrown down the memory hole, and he would be allowed to be a Twitter citizen again. Google, which also owns YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, surely other media companies too, they're all in on this. Political correctness. In the name of fighting terrorism and violence, don't you know? Except that's not what they're doing here. They're shutting down liberal Muslims like Tariq Fatah. They're shutting down objective news like polls that show conservatives doing well in France, a poll on the BBC. They're shutting down a movie star, calling his allies pretty and happy. These aren't government censors, but they collude with government daily on a host of issues from surveillance to politics. And always leaning to the left, don't they? Each of these companies massively donates to the Democrats as opposed to Republicans. They lobby hard and spend millions on their political issues. Facebook, especially, is for open border immigration from Mexico for whatever reason. Do you doubt that Donald Trump's comments will be filtered out as triggering by Zuckerberg? Will this filter be used in Gmail, too? The email owned by Google. Will it be used in direct messages to, I don't know, Twitter or Facebook? Why wouldn't it? Not just under pressure from governments, who with a flick of their tail could prosecute any of these companies for antitrust lawsuits or tax evasion. Do you doubt Barack Obama, who has used the IRS and Justice Department to harass his political enemies, would do so with Facebook too? Do you doubt that China's government would pressure Facebook too? Or just crusading Messiah executive billionaires, masters of the universe like Schmidt and Zuckerberg, who have it all, but still want more? They want to shape what you read, what you see, what you say. Maybe even one day, what you think. Stay with us. More about the media after these words. Well, it's New Year's Eve, so let's crash the media party. If you're wondering what I mean when I say the media party, I don't mean a formal political party with membership and rules and a party platform. I mean sort of a subconscious peer pressure, the Borg, a consortium, people in the same peer group who sort of me too each other, recycle ideas amongst themselves. They're friends, they date each other, they hang out with each other from the same social stratum. That's what I call the dominant political force in Canadian media. It's obviously there in the United States too. So we believe that here at The Rebel, we're outside the media party. It's like we're the opposition party to the media party. By the way, the media party isn't just about partisan favorites like Justin Trudeau versus Stephen Harper. It's about broader ideas too, everything from gun control to the Kyoto Protocol. It's New Year's Eve, so the party that we're going to have is crashing the media party. And who better to do this with me than my friend Brian Lilly, who joins us now via Skype from Ottawa. Hey, Brian.
Good to be with you, Ezra. It's always good to be outside of the media party as well.
I don't know if I defined it well enough. How would you define the media party?
Well, I think that's fairly accurate. An awful lot of the people that work and cover Parliament Hill all work in the same leafy neighborhoods. They cheer about diversity, but in some of these neighborhoods, the most diverse thing you're going to see is the Filipino nanny looking after the kids. There's one neighborhood in Ottawa, I like to say it looks like Oslo, maybe 60 years ago. If you don't look Scandinavian white, then something is afoot and something is odd. There are people that work in the media that live in the suburbs, that live where normal people live within Ottawa, but the core of them tend to congregate around the same areas, just as you described, same ideas, recycled, rinse, repeat.
Well, and it's not, you mentioned the ethnicity, and I think you were using that as a proxy for class. These are the fancy pants folks who all go to the same colleges and whatnot. But actually, the lack of diversity is not a racial lack of diversity or a gender lack of diversity. It's an idea lack of diversity. The cross-pollination between the Liberal Party and the NDP and the media is incredible as well, especially in a country as small as Canada. Anyway, I think our viewers, especially those who have been watching us for a while, know instinctively what we mean by the media.
Oh, absolutely.
Party. And what I'd like to do, Brian, with you over the course of the next 10 minutes or so is go through 5 or 6 or 7 examples of the most egregious media party moments of the year. So why don't we jump in, we'll play a clip or show a document, and then you and I can talk about them for a minute. We'll move on to the next one. That sound okay?
Sounds good to me.
All right. Well, the first one is your access to information request showing the CBC's attempt to block Justin Trudeau content from falling into the wrong hands. Explain what that means. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, we've been following this for a long time. It actually goes back to our Sun News days, but we just keep following it, keep submitting to access to information requests to see how far they're willing to go. And so the latest one documents their attempts to censor the internet. This goes back to 2013, though, in one of Peter Mansbridge's fanboy moments with Justin Trudeau. He got an all-access pass back then to follow Trudeau around his first day as Liberal leader, and that was the day of the Boston bombings. And Trudeau said, well, obviously the people that carried this out felt excluded. The people that bombed the Boston Marathon. Yeah. Well, it's a ridiculous statement. He should have said, it's too early, we don't know, because when the interview was happening, nobody really knew who was behind it. Yeah. Instead of saying that, he talked about people feeling excluded. The Conservatives used that in an attack ad, and since then, CBC has been on a crusade to stop their news footage from being used in any political ads. Doesn't matter that there's jurisprudence going back to 1988 when the Liberals used news footage in an ad and then won in court when CTV sued them. Didn't matter at all. They organized a consortium, all the other broadcasters, to say, we won't do this, we won't show it. Well, when a Conservative ad showed up on YouTube and Facebook, they sicked their senior legal counsel on them. YouTube and Facebook took a look at the complaint, as they will with anyone's, and said, you know what, you don't have a legal leg to stand on. It was good to see these American social media outlets responding to CBC that way. They didn't feel intimidated. They didn't feel they owed them anything, because most media will just cave to CBC. And their own legal counsel, the jurisprudence, the law was not on CBC's side, but they were able to block these ads from going on regular TV. Then they tried to censor them on the internet as well. Yeah. That should have been a widely reported story. It's not.
Well, the law of copyright goes back centuries, even before TV, radio, and it goes back to pamphlets. And basically, anyone is allowed to make fair use of small snippets or excerpts. It's the reason you can excerpt a book in a book review or show a clip on TV of something without the right to fair use. CBC itself was shut down. Let me show my second example that's immediately easy to grasp. What you talked about there is a little bit legal, and I think it shows a nefarious mindset. But let me show you something that you can understand in about 10 seconds just by looking at it. This is a videotape taken in the media room of journalists at the Paris Global Warming Conference last week when an agreement was made. Look at the reaction of the so-called reporters. Take a look. That is euphoria. That is jubilation. I can't remember the last time I jumped and kicked my heels up as I jumped. Like that's like a cheerleader move, literally a cheerleader move. That's an ecstasy move. That's like kids who have been at a rave for 6 hours and are high kind of move. That is what those journalists did en masse. How can you trust them to ever tell you the truth about the theory of man-made global warming?
You know, Ezra, there's so much I could say about this, from the fact that they don't read the UN's own scientific documents that show there could have been cooling up to 0.05 degrees of cooling. That's in the UN's scientific document, the one that supposedly backed up this Paris Agreement that they were cheering. But they don't look at that. You want to watch all the skepticism in a regular journalist wash away. Put an environmentalist like David Suzuki or Tim Flannery in front of them. They don't ask skeptical questions. They just gush. It could point to the video of me trying to question Suzuki and his hired union thugs shoving me and my camera. If that had been a Stephen Harper event, that would have been a national story. Wouldn't matter which media outlet Stephen Harper's hired thugs had pushed. That would have been a huge story. David Suzuki, nobody picks it up. There's no skepticism on this issue.
Here's a couple of quick snappers. This is a clip from Peter Mansbridge with Justin Trudeau right after he was elected Prime Minister. Here, take a look.
Are we wearing the same tie?
The limo, the arm, bulletproof, bomb-proof, whatever it is. How do you handle that? Because that's not you. We're on a bus heading up Parliament Hill, so it has that symbolism, I guess, that it's not limos.
And that's exactly what we're doing.
Very good. All right, you got it.
I have to hand it to Trudeau there. He mocked Peter Mansbridge for pointing out, hey, we're on a bus, feels like we should be singing Kumbaya. And Trudeau said, a lot of regular people ride buses, Peter.
Yeah, just unbelievable, the love in there. Of course, Peter Mansbridge, we only found out after the election, flew to Italy to preside over the wedding of Justin Trudeau's own communications director, Katie Purchase, and this was never disclosed. Imagine being so personally and intimately involved in the family of the Liberal Party spin doctor. You go and officiate their wedding. Just incredible. Last one before we take a break. This was shocking. The day of the election, October 19th, the Globe and Mail had a bombshell story about the Liberal Party, but deliberately chose to hold off publishing it because they thought mere voters, well, they wouldn't be able to handle it and they might actually be confused and not like the Liberals enough. Give me your quick words on this one before we take a break.
Well, the Globe tried to claim that one, they didn't want to be involved in the election. They didn't want to tip the scales. They put their hand heavily on the scales by choosing not to run the story. Two, they said there's a big difference between the federal and provincial Liberals. No, look at all the provincial Liberals leaving Queen's Park to come up to Parliament Hill to work right now. Look at the people around Trudeau, from Katie Purchase, Katie Telford, Gerald Butts, all these people, a good majority of them that helped him win the election came out of Queen's Park, and Kathleen Wynne herself campaigned nonstop. Shame on the Globe for the reporter did a great job on the story, but it was management at the Globe said, no, we can't run that till after the election.
Yeah. What was so incredible about it was their official excuse was, we didn't want our viewers to take the wrong conclusions from it. So they were placing their political judgment ahead of their news judgment. We're going to take a break, Brian. When we come back, we've got 3 more short snappers, including an incredible chant of Heil Hitler from the streets of Calgary and the media's response to it. It's New Year's Eve. We're crashing the media party. Stay with us for more on the Rebel.media.
Ontario residents are being hosed on electricity prices. The latest Auditor General's report says we've been overcharged by $37 billion over the last several years. That works out to nearly $2,800 for every man, woman, and child. Why? Mismanagement and bad policy choices from the Ontario Liberals. It's going to cost us billions more in coming years. Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli won't take responsibility. He's lashing out. It's time for Bob to go. If you agree, go to firebob.ca. That's firebob.ca and make your voice heard.
Welcome back. We're talking about the worst media party moments of 2015. By media party, I mean the bias. Sometimes it's an express bias on purpose, wittingly, like when the Globe and Mail held off on publishing a story. Sometimes it's just pure tone deafness, that the media thinks everyone thinks like them because they're in an insulated bubble, only talking to people who give them a right on, my view exactly. I want to show you an example of this. This is both a anti-Canadian Forces, anti-soldier bias, and also that groupthink kicking in. It's the front page cover of Maclean's magazine on their Remembrance Day issue. And they put 3 people on the cover calling them victims. Now, 2 of those people really were victims. One of them was a victim of a violent assault in Winnipeg. The other was a victim of Muslim terrorists kidnapping and raping her in Somalia. But the third is no victim. He's a perpetrator. He's a convicted war criminal, Omar Khadr, a convicted terrorist, a confessed member of Al-Qaeda. They put him on the cover as a victim in a soft-focus, lovey-dovey article on Remembrance Day. Brian Lilly, choosing to do that at any time is absurd and grotesque. It reminds me of when Rolling Stone magazine put Dzhokhar Tsarnaev on the cover, the Boston Marathon bomber, making him look like some millennial, dreamy hunk. But to do this on Remembrance Day was extra gross.
There was a way they could have done it without being so gross, Ezra. Yeah, Maclean's used to be dull and drab and boring. Then this guy that used to run National Post named Ken White came over, and he started doing controversial covers to get people talking. And putting Omar Khadr on the cover would be controversial to any normal person, but the current Maclean's, which isn't run by Ken White any longer, wouldn't see this as controversial. They didn't get what the big deal was. They could have put him on the cover and talked about all the things that he did and why this is a bad guy. But they didn't do that. As you said, they put him in a soft focus because the people in charge at Maclean's now, like in charge of most in the media, they just view Omar Khadr as a victim. He was a child soldier. He was the one that was done wrong to, not Sergeant Christopher Speer, not anybody else. It's Omar Khadr's the victim. That's the real problem here. If they put Khadr on the cover, but talked about what he really did and explained to Canadians why it was wrong, that would have been one thing. It was the article that went with it, plus who he was posing with. It just sent all the wrong messages. There was more outrage at you retweeting a photo that someone had done with him holding a sword, a Photoshop version of that cover. There was more outrage at that from the media party types than there was at the cover itself. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Sergeant Christopher Speer. That was the man Khadr murdered. I occasionally do some research on how many times Omar Khadr's name is in the media compared to Christopher Speer, compared to his widow, Tabitha Speer, and his fatherless children, Taryn and Tanner. And I would say 99% of journalists don't even know the names of the victims because they interrupt the official media party narrative as Khadr as the victim, Khadr as the child. There really were victims, there really were children. But to mention them would to take that victimhood back from an Al-Qaeda terrorist. Quick point before we move on to the next one. I remember the Ottawa Citizen, the newspaper of record in our capital city, on the day of Nathan Cirillo's funeral. That was the soldier who was murdered by a Muslim terrorist at the National War Memorial. On the day of Nathan Cirillo's funeral, the Ottawa Citizen ran a guest column by Omar Khadr saying what Canada should or should not do about terrorism, without indicating that he was a convicted murderer or terrorist. That can't just be accidental or subconscious. That is a witting editorial decision. Here, I want to move on to the next one. Rebuttal.
Yeah, and no, absolutely. That is a witting decision. And that, to me, that was just a sign of a deep rot in what should be the most important paper in the country, the Ottawa Citizen. Let me show you the next one. Let me show you a video. This is from 2014, but I want to talk about it today because it's even more relevant today. This is a video from Calgary, July 2014, right across the street from City Hall, in front of police and journalists. Look at what these young Muslim men are chanting in Calgary. Take a look. All hail Hitler. All hail Hitler. There were Muslims, cops, and journalists right in front of them. So, I mean, this meets pretty much every possible checkbox for news. Young Muslim men at a pro-Hamas rally holding an Arabic flag, chanting Heil Hitler at City Hall. The only thing you're missing to make this an explosive story is a Kim Kardashian connection. And let me show you.
Then it would break the internet.
Yeah, I mean, break the internet. But let me show you what the Calgary Herald's reporter, standing right there, wrote. Her name is Emily Stark, and she tweeted, look at this, she tweeted, "They're shouting things I shouldn't tweet." Tensions rising in the passive voice. Oh, were tensions rising on their own? They're shouting things I shouldn't tweet. Now, why shouldn't she tweet it? Why shouldn't she tweet the news? Is it because the word Heil or Hitler is some obscene expletive like the F word? No. Is it because it's not news? No, it's extremely news. She will not report it because it destroys the media party narrative as Muslim immigrants as the little lambs, and we're all just a bunch of Islamophobes if we don't like it, and shut up with you who are worried about Islamic extremism. Don't you know that's like 0.0000001%? So the Calgary Herald, sitting right there hearing all hail Hitler, refused to report it. What do you think of that?
Okay, let me go back to my days as a frontline reporter, because I wasn't always an opinion guy, Ezra. I spent a lot of time doing jobs like this reporter did, going out to protest. And time and again, you will see inappropriate things at protest, and most journalists don't want to report on it. That's why I always tell our cameramen, point your camera at the signs. But I have seen journalists standing there saying, well, we don't know what the protesters want. And then on their signs, they'll have Stephen Harper equals Hitler, or something promoting communism, or something promoting something violent, but they'll just say, because in the minds of many journalists, protesters are always good, never mind all the other layers that you've added onto it, but protesters are always good because they're activists. Unless they're pro-lifers or conservatives, protesters are good. So they never will say anything bad about a left-wing activist-oriented protest. They won't tell you what's on the signs. They won't tell you what they chant. And then you add on the fact that it's a minority group like Muslims, well, you're definitely not reporting on it. This goes much deeper than the fact that it was Muslim men. This goes to the whole mindset of journalists in this country, especially frontline reporters who we rely on to just give us the news straight. No spin, don't give us your opinion, just report the facts, ma'am.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. Let me tell you a quick anecdote. When I moved from Calgary to Toronto when the Sun News Network started, I started going to protests because in Toronto, like Ottawa, like Montreal, there's a protest every week. There's several every week. And I started going. And the first one was Occupy Toronto, which was a feast for the eyes. Just everything kooky and crazy and gross. And then a couple weeks later, I went to an anti-oil protest, and I thought, hang on. I remember you, I remember you, I remember you. And then I went to a third protest and said, hey, that's Dave Vasey. Hey, that's Sakura Saunders. Like, I got to know the actual individual people. Hey, didn't I see you in London, Ontario? Didn't I see you in Hamilton? And it was only... Do you remember
Bugs Bunny, the wolf and the sheepdog?
Vaguely.
And they check in and out at the same time, and then they beat each other up all day, and then they check out, they punch the clock at the same time and go home. It's kind of like that.
Well, but here's the thing. So in about 2 months, let's say my first 3 protests, I clued into what was going on. It was the same people every time. And I wasn't looking for that. It just sort of jumped out at me. And every journalist who went to these same events and had been doing so in Toronto for years before I came to town surely saw the same thing. And yet never once do they say, professional protesters, same old, Dave Vasey, paid by the unions to have a perpetual protest. If it's Monday, we're protesting against oil. If it's Tuesday, we're protesting against Mike Harris, whatever.
I used to see the same guys all the time, and I used to refer to that it was the same group. Hi, Dwayne. How you doing?
Yeah. But I don't know why the other journalists don't. Like if someone says, I'm busy, I got to rush in, rush out. But surely you how can you not recognize the same people? All right. I want to show you one last one, and this is my favorite. This is from a couple years ago, but it's an oldie but a goodie, and I like it because it shows that familiarity, that drinking each other's bathwater, that's the closed loop of the journalism industry and the political industry. This is a photo taken by Gerald Butts, Principal Secretary to Justin Trudeau, of him yucking it up with Althea Raj of Huffington Post. I think that's where she is now, and Paul Wells of Maclean's. And they're just yucking up, having a good time. And, you know, how can you expect people who are buddies like this, pose for selfies like this, are Facebook friends with each other, go out drinking with each other? How can you expect this insular clique to possibly provide us objective journalism about a guy they call Justin? None of them call him Mr. Trudeau, except for maybe on TV.
Well, you know, he said in an interview recently, if you can see his tattoos and you're drinking beer with them, then you can call him Justin. Well, you know, we were at the boxing match. We were ringside when he was just an MP, and I was a local reporter for, you know, in one of the markets that he represents. I ran into him at an event, had a beer with him, so I feel like I should be able to call him Justin. But I didn't realize that Gerald Butts is the one that had taken that photo. I've seen that photo before. I'll say this. Paul Wells is probably embarrassed by that photo, but has actually written good things about Stephen Harper and will ask questions of all sides. But Huffington Post and Althea Raj, who sat at a desk next to me in a previous job at Sun, essentially Huffington Post is the stenographer's notebook for Gerald Butts. You know, if they want to get something out in a positive spin, that's where they go. And there's too much of that going on in the nation's capital. There's too much chummy. It's why I tend not to go to too many of these events. Some people saying, yeah, but you sang karaoke with Glenn McGregor. That was on a dare at Ron Ambrose's Christmas party, and people thought there was going to be blood between us. But well, I tend to avoid those things for that very reason.
Well, and that's the thing, because I understand the human nature is, if you see people every day, if you see them at restaurants or clubs or bars or Christmas parties, if you share an office with them, human nature is, let's get along. If we have differences, let's brush them over, because it's no fun to go to work if you're fighting. It's no fun to be the guy stinking up the joint by being mean or rude. I get these social norms, the norms of politeness make us want to be chummy, but that does not serve the interest of asking critical questions of journalists in an objective way. And I think your greatest strength, Brian, you have many strengths. You know the news, you got a nose for news, you have the common touch, you can tell a story beautifully, but in my mind, your greatest strength is you do not value yourself by measuring how you get along with the rest of the mob. And you are not afraid to be a contrarian. That is more rare even than being conservative. Because even conservatives in Parliament feel an enormous peer pressure to go along with the groupthink. Being a contrarian is the rarest thing. Last word to you, Brian.
The journalists that I respect the most will ask the tough questions no matter how uncomfortable it is, as all those eyes are staring at you, and some are on the left, some are on the right, but that is more valuable, as you say, than just sitting there and going along to get along. Blow it up. You can have a beer later together if you want, but blow it up when the time comes.
Yeah, right on. Brian Lilly, our big boss in Ottawa, thanks for a year's worth of great coverage from Parliament Hill. Good luck to us all in 2016.